All right, welcome everybody to our latest Live Motocross podcast as we review the 2024 Motocross of the Nations with Jason Thomas. Obviously, before we welcome him, we'd like to thank our partners in 24MX, Dirt Store, Fuchs Silkaline, and Dragon Energy for all their incredible support, as without them, none of this would be possible. All right, welcome JT. Thanks for joining us after a crazy weekend at the Nations where the Aussies got the job done, mate. What a weekend it was. You crushed it on the commentary with Paul. Must have been amazing being there and obviously extremely busy as well.
Yeah, it was incredible. I am so privileged to be a part of that broadcast. If you had told me that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or longer, I would have never believed you. Never, ever. And you could say the same for Monster Energy Supercross or Pro Motocross. But to me, Motocross Nations is the most prestigious race there is. And to be able to do what I do there, it still doesn't seem real. But as for the weekend itself, incredible weekend of racing. You're always flirting with disaster on a weather scale with Matterley. That's just how it always is going to be. And you factor in the month of October. It wasn't perfect. It did rain on Sunday quite a bit, just not hard enough to really impact the track. But I feel like we were extremely lucky when you look at Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We're about as beautiful weather as you could ever ask for. And then just some spitting on Sunday wasn't a big deal. We had a tremendous weekend.
Oh, mate, it looked absolutely epic. And I guess good place to start is with the Australians, mate. Obviously, they did so well to get their first win ever. And you and Paul would say they're the 11th team to win the nation. So such an impressive effort. Long time coming, mate. Obviously, you're good mates with Burner and Reed and so many of the guys you've raced against and know so well have come so close, mate. So to finally get the job done. And I think Burner, he raced it 7 times. So to him be the team manager then, it would have been a really sort of emotional and special time for him. And I guess Webster, that 1 month in Florida, the HRC bike training with the crew and the preparation with the Lawrence brothers, a really good team sort of collective spirit and atmosphere about the whole thing. And yeah, the guys rose to the occasion, didn't they, mate? And Jet, guys, a battle. Hunter did his thing. Webster got that result in the first motor, the second 250 behind Kai de Wolf. So all the effort was there. The team were pulling in the same direction. The organisation was there. So just what an effort by the Aussies, mate. Must have been impressive seeing it in person.
Yeah, it was awesome for them. I certainly was cheering for Team USA, and I don't claim to be unbiased. I think that's part of the fun, or most of the fun, is everybody's cheering on their own country. But I did feel good for the Australians to never have won that event. And I've been there. I'm very good friends with Michael Byrne. At one time, we were extremely close. And I know how much that had to have meant for him. And he's kind of taken over the lead role there. He had been the protege for a long time to be into this role. And I think this was one of the first years where he was out in front. Like he wasn't kind of still in his learning phase. So this had to be a big moment, right? And you look at the team, the Jet and Hunter part of it was pretty obvious. I believe Jet's the best rider in the world. Hunter has really come into his own, especially this year on a 450. I think he's impressed most, if not everyone. And then the question was Webster, as you mentioned, like what could he do? Could he make it happen when he needed to? And really, I broke it down as he needed to have one heroic moto, just one breakout moto where he doesn't have to be top 5. Like that's a bridge too far. That's asking too much of him. But can you get a good start? Can you be one of the top 5 MX2 riders in that particular moto? Because I believe that would be enough to get it done. And in the end, that's the way it went, right? You're running all these scenarios, and you're kind of if this happens, then what type scenarios for the Motocross of the Nations. And I've been there enough, and I've studied it and kind of how the math plays out. And if everybody does what they're supposed to do on the elite teams, it really comes down to that third rider. Can they put in one moto that's kind of an outsized performance for the expectation? And that's typically where you get the result from.
Yeah, absolutely. It was so impressive. Obviously, he did so well on that bike. And obviously, he had his own issues too with goggles and whatnot and crashes on the Saturday. It was sort of, it had a lot of pressure on his shoulders and weight of expectation. So I guess to handle that so well and, out of the comfort zone like that, it was just a really great effort. And I guess listening to the commentary, mate, you and Paul were sort of, waxing lyrical about Jet, as we all do, mate. He's just so impressive, and he underlined his class yet again. And I guess he's just that complete package: fitness, skills, speed, and the way he wasn't burying the bike. He wasn't smashing the berms unnecessarily, getting the lines completely completely dialed and just so consistent. He was able to repeat that on a really, really brutal track. So I guess decision making and judgment had to be on point, and he found that flow pretty impressively. And I guess from the track perspective, you can talk on this too. Those off cambers sections are so challenging, especially with the ruts on them. You know, the balance, the cord, leg strength, they're very demanding. So you really have to get it all spot on, don't you, mate? So I guess talk on Jet and just how brutal that track was, because it was, you know, scaring a lot of the elite riders in the world, wasn't it? They admitted that. So what a day for him, and just the track looked savage.
Yeah, it was a brutal racetrack, and not one that the stateside racers would see very often. Sunday did come around. If the conditions were on Sunday the way they were on Saturday, I don't believe that Team USA would have gotten on the podium. You kind of saw them struggle they were tied for ninth, and there's a different mathematical equation there, right? You drop the third score, and they only take two, so it changes things for a team like Spain. And I made those comments, and some of the Spanish fans were upset with me, but that's just how it goes. Like, that's not a slight against anyone. It's just the math on Saturday is simply different than the math on Sunday. And if you don't recognize that, then you're going to have unrealistic expectations on the upside and the downside. So I just know how that typically goes. And that's kind of how it went, right? The track was so much more difficult on Saturday. And then as soon as I went out there on Sunday and kind of walked in and watched the free practice, I'm like, oh, it's a different racetrack. It's a little bit firmer. The riders that were struggling, namely like Cooper Webb, especially, he's not that he's going to go out and win MX2, but he's going to be a little bit better than he was. And that can be the difference. And I would even say a guy like Webster, he's going to be a little bit more comfortable. Like, he crashed, I think, 3 times on Saturday. That level of difficulty and strangeness and just very unique track that only a select few racers around the world would feel comfortable on, that's going to be lessened. The severity of that is going to simply come down. So these other riders, it's incredible riders. Like Kyle Webster's probably the best endemic Australian rider that there is, right? So he's going to be able to show that more because he's just going to feel more like himself. Cooper Webb, the same thing. I watched him. I'm like, okay, that's the Cooper Webb I know, I'm kind of used to. The one on Saturday, he looked like a fish out of water. He just looked like he was way, way, way uncomfortable. And that was the racetrack. You know, I don't know if you saw any of the post-race, there was some Instagram stuff. Like, the track was absolutely diabolical on Saturday afternoon. So a lot of those things kind of made sense. You saw the results swing back towards a little bit more normalcy than maybe we saw on Saturday. So typical Motocross and Nations things. You know, things aren't always identical, but they often rhyme, if that makes sense. If you've seen scenarios play out once, you kind of know what to look for.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Well said. And I guess for Team USA, from your perspective, obviously a really solid effort, impressive effort given the circumstances that's sort of thrown upon them in the lead up. And I guess Tomac was the key talking point. He loved the track. He was saying, you know, he loved that there was passing opportunities everywhere, and he just really enjoyed it. It was a really impressive ride. He got the starts. He was on the scoop. He definitely stepped up, and that huge quad he was ripping was really fun to see as well. And some of those landings weren't easy for those guys, landing in ruts and very treacherous. So those guys really had to commit to that. So, but yeah, he looked like he sort of refreshed and he was having fun and enjoying himself. And, you know, it does mean a lot, that race, he was saying, and you could see that the effort put in by the USA team as a collective was just showing that. So just give us a few words on Eli, because it was a really cool ride, wasn't it?
Yeah, you can usually tell where Eli is pretty quickly. He just looked aggressive right from the get-go, and that's the Eli you want. He's not able to hide his true kind of like the way he's feeling on the motorcycle very well. If he's not feeling it, he's just not going to look that great. Like, he's not revving it. He doesn't have any aggression. He just, you know, and this is going back 10 plus years of watching this guy race and really closely watching how this guy is, his mannerisms, his technique and those things. And he just has a very specific way of riding when he's feeling it. And it's high revving, all gas, like body positioning is really in the attack mode. And when he's not, he's just kind of not that way. Like, he looks more hesitant. He almost is like a little bit more back on the motorcycle. There's just all these little subtleties that you can kind of see with him. So when I saw him attacking the racetrack on Saturday in practice, and then the race, I knew the track was pretty beat up, but he looked okay. Like, he looked fairly himself, I'm like, that's not a bad sign. Good start. He looks like he's competitive here. And then I saw him Sunday and he gets that hole shot. And like I mentioned on the broadcast a couple times, I was trying to share that it's like how important it was for him to look the way he did and to be in the position he was in the early laps, because that is everything for Eli. If he gets up front and he doesn't look uncomfortable in that moment, the rest is going to take care of itself because he's charging, he feels comfortable. And I mean, it's freaking Eli Tomac, right? So you almost know what you're going to get at that point. It's the poor start, and he looks unable to really move past riders that he is far superior than. That's when there's a big problem. He's not comfortable. And he'll be the first one to tell you when he's not comfortable, he just doesn't have it. Like, he's just not going to be the same guy that, you're used to seeing or that the legend is made of. But this was not that weekend, and Team USA really, he was the backbone of the team, right? And I don't like patting myself on the back because there's no upside to it. But, if you go back and you listen to shows, and I talked about this a bunch, of the reason I thought Eli Tomac should be strongly considered for the team is because he is the rider that is capable of having days like that. If things go his way and he's 100% and he's feeling it, he can win the MXGP class overall. And I didn't think we really had other riders that could do that, right? AP's solid. AP wants to be there. We all know that. Chase Sexton, he's capable also, but he was already a shoe-in, right? The conversation wasn't between Eli and Chase. It was who was going to be the third spot. And I kept pushing the Tomac things. I'm like, hey, I've been to this race a lot. I've seen AP race this race several times now, and I think AP is a fine pick, no problem. I think he can be somewhere between 5 and 10 in both motos, which he was, but he's not going to go win the moto. He's not going to go beat Geiser, Prado, Jet, who, like, he doesn't have that top end in him, in my opinion. And that's not a slight against AP. I'm trying to be as objective and realistic as possible in my analysis, but I know and knew that Tomac has that ceiling, right? He has the top end ability to go do that. And at that race, you cannot simply go in with, hey, this team's all right. This should do. You can't do that at this race. You're going to get smoked at that race with that type of team. And I knew that. I've seen it too many times. I've traveled all over the world and watched that scenario play out, where everybody's kind of going, hey, you almost talk yourself into the team in a way. You kind of like, it'll work out. Like, those guys are pretty good. Like, they're going to figure it out. And I'm like, that's not how this race goes. That's not how this goes. Unless you have your best guys, you're not going to be in contention. And that's not it's not damnation. It's just reality at this race. And, listen, I'm wrong all the time. Happens. If you make enough proclamations, enough predictions, you're going to be wrong plenty. This one, I just felt like it played out the way I thought it could. Tomac was back to his best self, and he absolutely brought it. And if anybody was the reason that he was on the podium, it was Eli Tomac. No questions asked. Eli Tomac was the reason that Team USA got second.
Yeah, absolutely well said. It was a strong take, and it was a really good take as well, mate, because you're inside racing and covering the sport for so many years, and you're definitely vindicated in that, and it all worked out in the end. But yeah, that Tomac, the upside was just so high, and he has that sort of beast mode in the locker, doesn't he, mate? And you were talking about that before the team was even anywhere near announced, and just when he came back. So yeah, really cool to see him out there. And I guess to touch on AP, he loved battling it out there, loved battling with those heavy hitters, and he held his own this time around. He did quite well in France. Just that second moto especially would have left a bit of a bad taste in the mouth, but yeah, he looked happy in the UK, much faster. He liked the track, and credit to him, because it was a good bounce back after the Motocross of Nations last year, and I guess he'll be primed again to do it for Ironman as well, where there'll be a full sort of list of USA riders chomping at the bit, won't there?
Yeah, I think so. As far as AP, he did what he was supposed to do, right? If anybody was thinking that AP was going to go in and win the overall or win even the MX Open against Jet, I would ask, where have you been? Because that simply hasn't happened, right? Like, he hasn't been able to beat Jet. So why would he go to this race where the stage is the biggest, and that's when Jet's his best? When the lights are the brightest and the ask is the highest, that's when Jet is always his best. And I was told that years ago, and it's been true ever since. So I just pretend that that's gospel. So I didn't think that AP was going to go out and win. And then you factor in he's got to go up against the MX2 guys, which I was like iffy, like DeWolf and Kunin proved that they were faster than AP. I was sure in the MX3 and MXGP race that he would be somewhere battling to stay inside the top 10 just because that MXGP lineup was absolutely brutal. So I knew kind of where his range was. It would be in the first MX2, MX3 moto, somewhere between 3 and 8. And then the MXGP, MX3 moto, I thought somewhere between 5 and 12. And in the end, he was somewhere in that range, right? It wasn't like I didn't have a crystal ball, but you just look at, okay, who's he probably not going to be able to beat? Who should he be able to beat? If everything's neutral, this is where he's going to land. And he did the thing, right? That's the whole, that is what he has been trying to reconcile. Is he had a horrible performance when all the pressure was on in 2018. Like they all kind of didn't get it done when everybody was expecting them to win at Redbud. Then you go to 2023 in France and he has one good moto. And then the second moto, there wasn't really anything to lose. Like the team was in no position to succeed, but he felt like he let everybody down. He let himself down. So that wasn't really it either. This year, I think he put in the type of performance he can be proud of. Now, did he go win the race? No, but I don't think he looked at it and said, I'm going to go win the race. I think he wanted to have solid scores where Team USA was going to use both of his scores. And in the end, if you get on the podium and your team uses both of your scores, what more can you possibly ask for than that? Like, I think there is a lot to be said for simply that fact right there, as if you're landing on the podium and you are an integral part of that, which by definition would mean both of your scores got used. Hey man, that's plenty. I think job done, mission accomplished. And you should be smiling through the offseason knowing that you really have taken steps to correct deficiencies in your game that led to these struggles at Motocross of Nations.
Absolutely. Well said. He executed his role perfectly, as he would have wanted to, and as he probably, against that field where he should have stacked up against. So it was a really nice finish to a really quality year from him. It was very consistent, lots of good results. His starts were really coming together nicely. So, fair play to him, and he would be really satisfied to him to the off season with that. And I guess Cooper Webb, mate, obviously you guys were saying it was quite obvious how he's very tight on the Saturday, and he sort of got better as the weekend went on. But yeah, he was even saying he was scared in sections of that track. So a lot to deal with for him, a lot of pressure as well, but he sort of seemed to block that out reasonably well. And I think it was quite heavy for him on Saturday. I'd imagine you'd know best, mate. But yeah, he actually really enjoys those nations, environments and atmospheres. And there's nothing quite like a European nations, is there, mate? And I think he had 4 rides heading in on the 250. So, not an ideal prep by any stretch, but, battling those 250 guys like Kunin and DeWolf, and they leave it all on the line. They don't sort of build into it. They're just sort of pinning it from the outset, aren't they? So I guess your takeaways from Cooper Webb's weekend, mate, much respect to him.
Yeah, I think Webb, he had a really tough ask here. He rode exactly one moto of Pro Motocross in preparation for Motocross of Nations. He had precisely 2 weeks of preparation on the 250, and he went out there and got a top 10 in one moto. Now, qualifier wasn't exactly what he wanted. I think he was 7th or 8th, something like that. It was okay, great start. First moto was not it at all, and he knew it. That was their throwaway score, and I think they got second for a reason. Like, I think they were the second best team on the day. But I think when it was all said and done, Team USA needed him to produce some sort of solid score in that second moto, because if he does the same thing he does in Moto 1, they don't get second, they get third or worse. So I think he really came through, and it's not going to be a day that goes down in infamy, like the legendary Cooper Webb performance. That's not going to be what it was. But when no one was willing to step up, the team almost didn't go. We didn't have a solid, we were on our third MX2 rider for the team. He hasn't raced a 250 in 7 years. He hasn't raced Pro Motocross all summer. He was nowhere near 100% prepared for this. And yet he stepped up and got a 9th, or what did he get in that second moto? 9th, I think, in the final moto. I nothing but kudos and nothing but credit and respect to put on Cooper Webb's name. And when you look at riders that you want on the team, right, regardless of their performance, Cooper Webb's name has to be right at the top. There may be better choices over time. There may be people riding better. but never will you find someone who wants to be there more and is more committed and all into the race than Cooper Webb is. And that to me, that means a lot.
Yeah, so impressive to see him step up, a little bit underdone, obviously, but yeah, he made it happen and so cool. And I guess as we sort of wrap towards the end, mate, any other standout rides you'd like to mention? Obviously, Geiser flexed the muscles to win the Class 1-1 there with that dramatic pass over Jet at the end, mate. I guess he finished his season on a high, boost ahead of next year. And you were at that MXGP finale where, he had that adversity in China leading in. He didn't quite get it done, mate. So that was a really, sour taste to end the season. Then he, bounced back again with the Great Nations. And I guess Coonan as well, just such a weapon. Obviously, broke the collarbone, and it's been announced that he'll go MXGP Red Bull KTM, which has been the talk for a while now, which is a massive step. So just some of those standout rides and performers you'd like to touch on as well.
Yeah, for Geiser, it was interesting because he had nothing to lose. He truly had nothing to lose, and he was so frustrated after the way China went and losing the championship in the fashion that he did. I think this was just kind of a release of frustration, and you know what? I'm going to let it all out right here. I'm going to do everything in my power to win this race, and not for nothing, but I'm going to try to show everybody that I'm the best rider in the world, right? The championship's been decided. He didn't win the championship, but you know what? I've got one race to show everybody what I can do and why I led the points for so long in the year of 2024. And I think he did that, right? And that last lap pass, for Jet, I think it was really tough because he was trying to be really careful on the last lap or two. He had the weight of a country that had never won this event on his shoulders, and he knew that, right? I think that if Jet had no pressure and it's like, hey, you just need to make sure you win this moto, that he could have pushed more and made sure that he held Geiser off. I truly do. And that's okay if people don't agree. But I was watching very closely, and Jet was being incredibly conservative in the last lap or two. Once he made a couple big mistakes, he's like, okay, I can't screw this up. He could have pushed more. Now, maybe that pushing would have led to a crash. That's also possible. But there are very two different scenarios where, one, Jet knows they're in position to win, and Tim Geiser doesn't really care because Slovenia is not even close to in contention to win. So their mindsets and a willingness to go for broke there are in very, very different places. So you have to factor that in. And I'm not making excuses for Jet not winning. That's just the reality of the situation. And until you're there at that Motocross Nations and feel the pressure of everybody is on pins and needles because they're going to win this thing, and the only way they won't win it is if Jet crashes or cartwheels or does something really stupid. That's the situation he was facing. So for Geiser, congratulations. You did what you set out to do. Nothing but kudos to send your way. But for Jet, I think he was like, okay, man, yeah, great. Good job, Geiser. Like, you almost cleaned us out. You won the race. But I just sealed the deal for Australia for the first time in history, right? Like, he immediately was probably like, oh, dang, I wish I'd won, but we did it, right? It wasn't even like their frames of perspective were so far from each other in that moment. And I kind of hated it for Jet a little bit because everybody's piling on kind of, oh, Geiser told you to. I'm like, did you guys watch Jet come from 10 seconds down and pass everybody? And I don't know if you guys missed all of that, but yeah, just don't take shots at Jet Lawrence unnecessarily. Like, those are not appropriate in my mind for the ride. And I hope that he isn't listening to, because I just saw a bunch of people saying, and it's okay to be a fan of Tim Geiser. It's okay to be a fan of MXGP. That's awesome. Like, there's no one taking anything away from that, but don't put Jet down in the process of propping Tim Geiser up. Both of them should be commended for how incredible that race was, not one guy beat the other or vice versa. Who cares, right? Australia got the job done. Tim Geiser had a fantastic day. They gave us the race of the weekend in the final moto. That should be the story. I just saw some really negative comments, and I was like, just get out of here with that. Like, there's no need. There should be zero negativity about anything that happened in that final moto. It was all positive. Like, everybody that watched were the benefactors of it. Touch on Coonan really quickly. I mean, Coonan is next. Coonan is coming. The move to MXGP is an interesting one. I had really deep conversations with a lot of people about it, and I don't know how I feel, right? Because I don't think that his long-term future is in MXGP. Like, I think he's coming to America in 2026. I feel very confident that he's coming to America in 2026. So maybe it's just, hey, we want to send him out there and see how he does and give him a shot at it. I know they tested the bike. I also know that Red Bull KTM DeCarli team needs a 450 rider, right? They didn't have that hotshot guy to put there so he can fill that role. So there was a lot of push-pull, a lot of unique circumstances that are leading to this, but that kid's the real deal. Whether or not he shows everybody in 2025 or not on a 450 is not, I don't think that will be the deciding factor, but I'm just telling you that the talent that kid has and the will to win and all of the things you can't teach that he has are not going away. He's only 18 years old, and that kid is destined for greatness. Regardless of which series or which continent he's on, I'm telling you right now, that kid's destined for greatness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of a weird one in some ways, like you said, because you'd assume he'd be dropping back to the 250 when he goes to America and Supercross. So I guess we don't know all the inner details, like you said, but yeah, it's a big step. And his mindset's just so forceful, and he's got an insatiable appetite to win and succeed. And second's not an option for him. And I guess just before we go, just a couple of words on Kai de Wolf is also another man that could be racing MXGP, and he's also going to the States to do a bit of Supercross riding and testing. So just your take on that too.
Yeah, de Wolf shall be interesting. I don't know what to make of his plans. I know he wants to be in America. He was telling anyone and everyone that all season long that he wants to be in America, but there isn't really room for him at the moment. So I don't know how they do that. Austria needs to protect their up and coming MXGP contingent, right? They need someone to stay over there and win MX2 and MXGP world titles for the next decade. I would assume that a year ago they had Lucas Kuhnen and Kai de Wolf in those plans. No, I don't know if that's going to change. The simple fact is, if the Austria group won't take them to America, someone else will. That's what they have to face as well, right? They can't just say, no, you're staying in MXGP, because Honda or someone will sign them. Just like Jorge Prado is going to end up going to Monster Energy Kawasaki. Someone's going to take him to America. It doesn't have to be Austria. So he's going to go test. He's going to go ride. A guy like Mitch Payton will take Kai de Wolf tomorrow. If he's available, he will sign him tomorrow and find a way with Monster backing. They will do it. I promise you. They have a really full team, but they will find a way to sort this out. Now, Kai's going to be in MX2, I think, for sure in 2025. I think that is a guarantee he is going to be back there. But for 2026, it wouldn't shock me at all if both of the Kuhnen brothers and Kai de Wolf was in America. Now, I don't know about de Wolf. It's a little bit more uncertain. I think Lucas Kuhnen and Sasha Kuhnen's fate is a little bit more set. But there's no doubt that these kids want to come to America. Like, they, right or wrong, they feel like there is opportunity, and they like the way that American racing looks at the moment. So, yeah, interesting times. I'm sure that Infront and David Longo hate seeing and hearing those comments, and especially like Jeffrey Hurlings in Spain. That can't fit well with them. And you don't want to see mass exodus the way you did 10 years ago with Muscan and Roxon and all these guys. As soon as they get good, they're gone. That was the thing. You don't want to see that happening again, because they had done a great job of retaining all that talent since then. The Febres and the Geisters, and they kept them, the Prados and the Cairolis, and they kept everyone. And this would be a return to that formula of them getting good enough to leave and then leaving. So there's a lot of politics and a lot of conversations that need to be had in the short term to make sure that the status quo remains where it is, because that same old conversation is coming up again. When I was over there in April this year, I was shocked at how much I heard it, and I had not heard it in a very long time the way I had about, hey, these guys want to go to America. Where do you think they should go? And I'm like, wait, what? Like, these are the quote unquote next for MXGP. Like, where is this coming from? But it was a really prevalent conversation. So interesting times ahead, no doubt.
Yeah, it'd be really cool, mate. Watch this space for sure. And obviously, thanks again for taking the time to join us this season on the podcast, mate. The 2024 off-season is finally here for you. I know you're still flat out, but I guess just quickly, a bit of time to rest, relax, have a holiday. Supercross will roll around in no time. But yeah, just wanted to say congratulations on another superb season covering the sport. Been a massive one for you on so many levels, and you can look back on it and be super stoked and proud of what you've achieved, mate. So thank you again, and just some final words there.
Yeah, mate. Thanks for having me. I'm hoping that I'm on the team for the broadcast in 2025. I think we'll get news of that sometime in the next month or so. But I've done everything I could possibly do to stick around. I know I'll be a part of some MXGP rounds in 2025. So yeah, hope I'm there. I love every second of it. It's the greatest privilege of my life, and hopefully I'm around for a long time.
No worries, mate. Yeah, for sure. Fans love you. All the best, and thank you again, and have a great one, mate. We'll speak soon.
Thanks, mate.
No worries. Have a good one.